Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news for December 10th, 2025. I feel like the video game awards are likely going to happen either later this evening or sometime tomorrow, maybe Friday even. But yeah, they definitely seem close. I know Jonathan Blow just made an announcement hinting that there will be an announcement about the game that his company has been working on. Jonathan Blow, maker of The Witness and Braid, and maybe his next game will be interesting, maybe not. His games tend to have interesting mechanics, and it's best to pay little attention to him otherwise. He is kind of a pain and an obnoxious person, or at least he comes off in every presentation I've seen him in about that. Yeah, what else? It's Wednesday. I decided to do something really stupid. We'll do about an hour of warm up and then we'll jump into video game news. That's not the stupid thing, that's the normal thing, although it may be stupid. Before streaming today, I decided to go outside and use a relatively new shovel to try and move a tree sapling that had sprouted up. I have another one to move too, and that really killed me physically and exhausted me, so I had to lie down like over 100 beats per minute on my heart rate is what my cheap $10 watch told me, and over 151 on the high on the blood pressure. For me particularly, it's the highs on the blood pressure that really tend to spike up with any activity. And yeah, you can definitely feel it too. So yeah, the tree sapling looked really small above ground, but actually had about 3 or 4 times the circumference of the roots. So it was actually much more embedded and much deeper than I thought. I was hoping that I was going to be able to shove the shovel in 4 times in a square around it and just yank up the sapling completely and then move it. And it's probably a fool's errand to move it, and it's kind of dangerous to move it because you're digging in your yard, but not particularly deep. One would assume that if you're not pushing the shovel far below, at least several inches below the length of a shovel head, that you shouldn't be running into things. But you know, nowadays things are kind of shallowly buried, like sewers, cable, internet, things like that. They barely put them a few inches down. So yeah, there is a slight danger there. Then I was debating about where I was going to put the saplings, as far as just how close to the neighbor's property line and how in parallel with other trees should it really be, or should it look more natural, or how far away from the curb. Which, yeah, I definitely think that the city would chop it down if there was a tree too close to the curb, within the first 5 feet or so of the curb. They're not gonna like that at all. So yeah, just doing a little bit of gardening. Haven't done gardening in decades, for a good reason. I kind of enjoyed it in my youth, but I was super allergic to everything too. So there was a level of it that really didn't work well with me. We've got a Yu-Gi-Oh! Event still going on. Apparently, we are on the 3-year anniversary of the original creator of Yu-Gi-Oh! Dying. He jumped in the water in Japan trying to save some drowning people, which is incredibly dangerous, even for lifeguards, and ended up getting drowned themselves. People who are drowning panic and thrash around, and frankly, it's just kind of hard to manhandle even a child's body in the water without drowning yourself. That might explain some of the stagnation on Yu-Gi-Oh! But I feel like mostly it's probably just because Yu-Gi-Oh! Is such a old series anyways. Yeah, we haven't seen any new Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime. Now, in fairness, I don't know if he was actually involved with any of that anyways. It may very well be the case that he just made the original manga and that was just about it. And the original manga of Yu-Gi-Oh! Intended to have different games anyways, and that every chapter would be potentially a different game. Or every arc would be a different game, which they tried a little bit of that in the original anime series, but even then it didn't really catch on. Dungeon Dice Monsters, for instance, nowhere as well remembered as some of these other, as the Duel Monsters card game is. And the manga in its original form, 50% off. This is the first time we've seen any sales. Yeah, the manga in its original form was a lot more violent and more mature as far as the audience they were targeting, whereas nowadays the most recent Yu-Gi-Oh! Things are pretty tame and child friendly, just wasting all of the resources, which is really a small amount of resources really I even have. So apparently I need another 150 plus gems. There's a whole bunch of stuff. I don't think anything would convince me to come back and play this game though and really try and grind it out, nor do I think I could catch up. You'd almost certainly have to put some actual money into the game to do that. Yeah. Okay. So, what have I been doing over the past couple of days? I guess is what we should talk about. Little tweaks here and there on the Violent Monkey scripts to replace several other extensions, including uBlock Origin. I think I've probably made a pretty good argument that I could uninstall several of these at this point. I don't think it would affect anything. Then I am also giving some thought to another one of my plugins, which makes all new tabs open up in the new tab when you click on it, even if it is linking to the same domain normally. in Firefox, if you click on something, it won't open it in the new tab. If I can figure out how to do that on a case-by-case basis for certain domains with Violent Monkey scripts, that would be great. I don't know if I could really fix the duplicate tab extension. There might be an argument to getting rid of Gesturely as another extension. I'm going to say no to SteamDB, no to snap links, maybe yes to adding URL to the window title, but maybe that won't even be necessary going further in the future. So I'm really just trying to get all of the extensions gone. Let's scroll down the 24-hour peak SteamDB thing. I came in here and tweaked it so it now no longer will highlight games that I've already purchased, owned, followed, or wishlisted, because while that information is useful to an individual, it's not useful to the rest of the world. I've been playing a lot of Balatro, made a lot of progress. There's literally only one Joker left for me to discover. That got me, in total, all the progress got me to the point of being at 50% completion. I am working on defeating the black stakes, which then unlocks blue stakes, which then unlocks orange stakes, which then I hope unlocks gold stakes. So there's about halfway up the difficulty ladder, and really every victory really has just been flukes, just getting really lucky and figuring out basically one strategy that works. And it's kind of a crazy strategy in which you just play high card over and over and over again, and you have jokers that turn a high card into a very high scoring hand. Balatro is not actually poker because you're not actually setting your hand against an opponent's hand. Which, yeah, you could certainly remake Balatro so it was more like poker and you were playing against a dealer who had their own poker hand, who then you could manipulate what the dealer did to cheat in the favor of the player to make it a better game. Balatro definitely is missing some optimization and ease, and it shows certainly in the achievement numbers that a lot of people just are not going to make it to the end of the highest difficulties, and almost nobody's going to make it to 100% completion of all the achievements, which would include completionist plus, just because you'd have to grind like crazy. I did find that as I was waiting for my macros to run this morning, I could play Balatro and have something to do. I did have a bit of a what is that word? Recidivism? Relapse is the word. And then I did watch one Sudoku from Cracking the Cryptic, and hopefully I don't fall into too much of that because that clearly was a major time waster. And I'm doing a lot of cleaning and decluttering. Actually, I'm surprised on how much more stuff I found that really would have been easy toss stuff had I just seen it and looked at it earlier. It's been roughly a year now that I've been trying to clean and declutter my house, and yeah, I'm not moving really at a great pace. Most of last year also was feeling pretty sick and not very capable. Same tweaks happened here for the most wishlisted games chart. So yeah, there's no more tags showing up for things wishlisted and followed. Of course, cleaning and decluttering is also getting undermined by Christmas holiday shopping too. My subwoofers I got, and a bunch of other stuff is all sitting outside. Interesting, some of it was delivered by UPS and not Amazon.com. And it seems like UPS trucks may have cameras on it. Either that or somebody had a assistant on their trucks, which also may be the case. I wouldn't be surprised if there is a fairly big split between slightly heavier items being delivered by UPS and then fairly lightweight items being delivered by Amazon delivery service themselves. So yeah, it may have been that a helper was taking a picture off the pack, but it is slightly interesting to get a picture where it's not of my front porch, but it's of a delivery man moving a dolly cart full of boxes up towards my front porch, and you can see the delivery man is there holding the dolly cart and far away from the camera. But I wouldn't put it past people, UPS, to have just straight up tracking cameras all around the car. It would make a lot of sense just for car insurance reasons and accident reasons to have cameras all around the car. I believe the new design of the post office trucks also we're going to have cameras all around the car, and it is pretty commonplace now to just for lane assistance and driving assistance things to have cameras around the car. I made some tweaks on this day in history from Moby Games to try and squeeze out some of the spacing. Some of these websites have hard-coded spacing and margins, and so it's not going straight to the top of the page here. But I don't know if I really want to see if I can tweak it some more. Some of these pages are also fairly difficult, and so that is a issue, is that sometimes it's just really hard to figure it out, and Steam is probably the most difficult, most complicated pages to try and manipulate, and so I really have been avoiding and not making as much progress on the Steam updates as I would like. I did figure out where the adult content pop-up wasn't working on one page. Apparently some games don't have any mature content description attached to them, even though they're tagged with things that would clearly highlight that they are adult games. And when that description part of the HTML is just completely missing, the code as it was crashing. So that's the kind of failure you don't want to have happen. And I just corrected that by making sure that there was a test to see if it exists in the first place before I tried to go any further. But yeah, speeding up the slideshow is still proving to be very difficult, and adding more code to what a Steam page looks like is going to take a little bit of work, but it shouldn't take that long once I actually put some time into it. I've also been updating the thumbnails, or re-adding the thumbnails for a second time to Fallout New Vegas. Zig made those thumbnails, and then for one reason or another they all disappeared and didn't apply, and so I've been doing that in batches to see if that works and if the thumbnails stay this time. If I was really ambitious, I'd do some A/B testing on the titles too. I think just the act of doing A/B titles and A/B testing on the thumbnails makes for a higher chance of you getting double views, because while YouTube says they're going to work on only showing one thumbnail and one title to each individual viewer, at the moment, it definitely doesn't seem like it works that way. There's plenty of videos I've seen where the thumbnails have magically changed or the titles have magically changed, and I don't think it's a case that people in large mass are going in there and manually changing the thumbnails and titles. They almost certainly are using the YouTube built-in A/B testing, although they might be using an external A/B testing plug in their system too. Yeah. I don't know if I have any other things I really want to talk about in the warm-up. So this may just be a shorter warm-up anyways. Saw an interesting slick deals in that Fritz the Cat is $10 on Blu-ray. It's not a movie I'd recommend anybody buy or own. There is not even really a large chance that it would become lost media or censored. Fritz the Cat is one of the first animated pornographic level of animation movies that was actually put in wide release in theaters many decades ago. The animation is terrible. There's a kind of history behind it as far as who the animator is, but you'd have to kind of know who he was. He had a comic strip called Fritz the Cat before then, but yeah, it's not really worth watching. And certainly it was, I think, a fairly shocking thing to come out, I think, in more standard theaters and be animated, and perhaps is one of the major examples of where the hysteria, for lack of a better term, came about, that adult animation was just trying to trick people or entice children or something like that. Is that there should have just been a lot more warnings going on at movie theaters. And even now, I'd say Fritz the Cat is still pretty mature, so it's not like times have really changed in any way. There's tons of drug use and drug references, inappropriate levels of perhaps racism in it too. I'd have to really go back and check that, but probably. And just significant inappropriates of nudity and sexuality. I think I made some tweaks here on the gacha charts, but I'm not sure. Still playing Pokemon TCG Pocket, still trying to just get everything. Still playing Memento Mori and trying to get everything there. It'll be a longer journey by far to get everything in Memento Mori than Pokemon TCG Pocket. I'm still every now and then doing Madoka, Magi, etc. I'm doing it like once per day. Yeah. Let's see, do I have anything else? No, I really don't. Like, nothing's really coming to mind. There's just not a lot going on. Sales aren't really happening. A couple of the comics I wanted to get were somewhat discounted, so I grabbed a couple of trade paperback style comics. They're still overpriced, but everything is these days, and it's kind of ridiculous to buy those types of things because those are also things that I probably am never going to actually read. So I'm definitely deeper in the danger zone of just owning a bunch of stuff. Just own it. And with my eyesight potentially not getting better, almost certainly it has a low chance of getting better. Reading things is less likely. Although it's farsightedness, so holding something close to my face to read it wouldn't be too hard. Same is true with the Steam Deck, holding that close to my face to see things. It's not really become a problem yet. But I do have real concern here that my eyesight will just get worse and worse rapidly, and then I might end up blind. And if I end up even legally blind, I really don't know what I'd do with myself. I'm probably too stupid to learn Braille or anything like that, learn coping mechanisms. And so I have such a significant amount of entertainment that is based on visuals. I'm not very interested in audio. I don't listen to music. I listen to the same talk radio podcast things on YouTube over and over again every day. Opie and Anthony and Ron and Fez, more Ron and Fez than anything. Like, it really wouldn't be much of a life for me. And it definitely wouldn't be the life I'd want for me if I did go blind. Couldn't play video games, or almost any video games. There might be a few I could manage to play. Yeah, it really would be just the end of enjoying life for what little I have found to enjoy in life. So it is a really terrifying prospect, to say the least. Although not terrifying enough to have me go see an eye doctor. Who knows though? Maybe I will do that next year. I actually did bother to go through the whole Obamacare setup this year and set up some healthcare on a healthcare plan. Although it's a plan you can't really use, because if you did use it, you're gonna really just be paying the same amount you'd be paying anyways. It's only really a lot of those cheap bronze level plans are really only designed in case of an emergency that you're planning on possibly being in the hospital for multiple times in a year. Which I figured there might be a chance that happens as I get older, so it is better than nothing. Although it still may not be the best option. The best option may very well be to throw away your wallet and tell them your name is John Doe and just never let them identify you at all. The other trick in the ER is to potentially lie and say you feel like you're having a heart attack for faster service. Of course, you might actually kill a human who is having a heart attack with that lie. So it's not particularly an ethical thing to do. But they only move fast if they think you're having a heart attack. Although they might also move fast in the wrong ways and cut your chest open when it was unnecessary. I didn't fix this page because it's going away, so it just didn't seem worth it to try and address the visuals there. We are 227 hours into Balatro. I've discovered every voucher, which only 5.8% of players have done, but the remaining 8 achievements would be incredibly difficult to pull off. And I definitely think the people that are still playing Balatro must really love it, or must be really obsessed about getting all the achievements, because it is a game that is clearly got a back end of another 100 hours of gameplay that won't really feel any different. The only thing that might change things, and I'm hoping this happens, but I have very little faith it will, is that maybe if you unlock the gold stake difficulty, which I assume is the highest stake difficulty, maybe it isn't, if you unlock the gold stake difficulty and put gold stickers on certain jokers to prove that you've won the gold stake difficulty with those jokers. Maybe those gold stickers do something to the jokers to make them more powerful so that the game would get less difficult. But I suspect that's not the case. I suspect they really are just anticipating you to spend 5 hours for one victory every single time. I'm already probably 70 hours into the game. I estimate that if you were to try to do 100% of everything and you can actually win, which is a big if, you would probably spend another 100 hours in the game. Yeah, just grinding. In my series, it's going to be very different than how I usually would make footage because a lot of my gameplay was done off screen and a lot of the victories are happening off screen as I just try over and over again to win and get lucky. And a lot of losses are off screen too, so kind of works both ways. We're still waiting for the 18th for the Steam Winter Sale. I do feel like there's probably less of a chance I'm really gonna buy a lot or anything even. This Wizard 101 gets promoted as a free-to-play game quite a bit, so it must be fairly popular still. Layers of Fear is on sale. Some little smaller things. Inscription for $6 is probably not a terrible deal, and anything on sale right now arguably maybe won't be on sale during the big winter sale. How's this one doing? Still very positive. Metro Exodus Gold Edition. 2 different games. 2 different versions of the game on sale, getting promoted. It's kind of hard to think that too much is actually going to really get bought right now if in the next few hours to the next couple of days the Video Game Awards happen and you just have a whole bunch of new games and trailers and teaser announcements sucking all the oxygen out of the room, which is what I think is likely going to happen. One of the things I did do is I was able to update the setup. So now if I run to an adult game, theoretically, I'm not going to risk it. All the images on that page will not load. That being said, if I hover over something, I may still get the pop-up in that case. But yeah, just having all the pictures not load during an adult game while looking at an adult game makes a decent amount of sense, but it's also a potential thing to avoid. Slightly changed where this checkbox lives, but the move is eventually to get rid of this checkbox altogether. I didn't have it quite in the right place as it's being added by JavaScript. It was being added really at the end of this part when it should have been added at the end of a invisible part, which will mean things will just space a little bit better and it doesn't load at the moment, but there is now a auto close button. So this is what we're going for. Some point I'll probably adjust the font size and the color so it tries to match a little bit to the page. But yeah, the goal is to have several buttons, and one of them will be close. So you can just click it and the page will automatically close, so I no longer have to do the gesture to swipe down the close. And then there's also going to be a next button, but it won't actually be a next button. It just changes the tabs and leaves the tab open. It'll be a button that just automatically does the process of taking the information to make a YouTube short down and downloading that as a file right then and there. So the goal is to get a nice robust new system where, while I'm looking at games during these streams, I'm also taking down all the information to make YouTube shorts, and there isn't then several hours after every stream in which I need to run a macro that is buggy and crashes half the time. But yeah, there is still a lot of work that needs to be done before I get to that point. We still don't have any Steam Deck refurbs available, no surprise there. I adjusted this, but I think I actually want to probably adjust this chart a little bit more, because ideally I think it's probably better to just hide this part too. But again, games no longer have whether they're being followed by me or on a wish list already until you hover over it. And this is the kind of hover, particularly on Steam, where there might be a thing. Yeah. I don't think I'd go to Bollocks Pit anytime soon though, because it's another gameplay mechanic that isn't really my favorite kind of gameplay mechanic. The way I see it, I still feel like the Binding of Isaac Rebirth, as weird as it may be, plays way better and is way more interesting of an experience. And it definitely has years upon years of more content in it also. So, of the roguelite experience, I still think Binding of Isaac Rebirth with its DLC is by far the best option. And maybe I would go and play Vampire Survivors if I was going to play another game like Balatro. Because that again would just be a little bit more action-y. Which maybe that is specifically my styles, that I want a roguelite with some decent amount of action, whereas Balatro is low in actual action, and you still are doing a lot of slow playing of poker hands. It is perhaps a shame that there isn't a ton of money that has been put in the lap of the creators of Balatro to polish it and make it a higher class product than it really is. The money has come, but the elements have not. Oh, well, I guess this is something that's not working. Why is that the case? Well, well, this is broken as far as having black bars on the side, so I'll need to work on that. But before I work on that, I think I want to take a kind of early first bathroom break, so I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. So, I don't know if I mentioned it, but I got a second pair of glasses. I think the first pair I got was 3 times the magnification, -3, I think. Um, so, I think this one is 1.5 times. And I can still see the screen and it's not blurry, so I wonder if there is perhaps even more tweaks that need to happen or not. I'm not sure. Like, they only really come in 25 decimal fractions, quarter fractions, so I could get like 1.75 probably. I could probably get 2. May not even be able to get 1.75. It may go directly to 2. And so maybe I should go to 2. I'm not sure. Inherently, I'm going to have to wear these glasses for a while and see how they work in the long run. It does feel like the different monitors at different angles look different, and when I'm looking straight on, it's easier to read than when I'm looking up at the TV that's at probably a 30-degree angle from what I'm looking at. But yeah, I don't anticipate that I'm gonna just stumble on a perfect magnification and everything is fixed permanently, or that my eyes correct themselves. And what really I should do is go to a store, like a glasses store, and just try different sizes, but you really need to live with them for a couple of days too, to be certain what really works and what doesn't. Of course, I guess I could send back one pair. That might be something to do. Certainly, it's just buy 5 different sizes and return 4 of them. I'm sure Amazon would love that, but it is a thought, certainly. Of course, that has nothing to do with video games. Speaking of other things I bought on Amazon, I got these protein bars that are called Cookified, and the first one I tasted awful. The second one was better than the first one, but still not great. They were much smaller than what I thought they would be too. As I continue to try and find something that would last a long time and be high in protein and taste good, which is the ultimate triangle there. I guess also it's probably closer to a square, and that you also want it to be relatively cheap. I've failed in this variety pack. I've tried 2 flavors and not found either flavor good enough, so unless there was one flavor that just tasted really good, I will probably never order that again. And certainly a matter of taste. There's other people may love it, the flavors. Unfortunately, a lot of health foods barely are edible, or they'll say it tastes great relative to other health foods, but not really taste anywhere as good as something that isn't healthy for you. Moving on to Video Games Chronicle articles. I think I may have done a little bit of tweaking on this page, but I'm not sure. A pair of Nintendo 64 platformers from Ubisoft are coming to the Switch Online's Nintendo Classics library. Rayman 2 and Tonic Trouble will be added next week. Okay. So these aren't, I think, games that particularly catch my attention much. One of the things I wasn't able to figure out how to do is to get this to disappear. As far as I can tell, it seems to be pretty impossible because it is popping up and being generated when you pause the video. So I think I'll just live with that instead of spending more time trying to block those suggestions. I very rarely pause on these trailers anyways. Nintendo 64 was definitely the era for platformers, and I'm sure a big reason for that is Mario 64, just setting pace and inspiring a bunch of other companies. But I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't just directly a case of Nintendo heavily suggesting platformers and making the software development kits heavily favor platformers. But yeah, even in the golden age of platformers, which a game like this is from that age, I don't recognize these games, really. I didn't play them, and I doubt they are anywhere as good as Mario 64 was. So yeah, there's definitely a thing there. And that was back when Ubisoft was spelled UBI space SOFT. So an early version of Ubisoft too. An official licensed Scottish football mobile squad building game is out now. Crowd Legends Club Football lets players put together teams of SPFL players in Scottish football leagues. Interesting. I'm sure way more interesting to people who are into soccer, though. Xbox has launched an Indie Selects Demo Fest with 37 demos to download. All demos are free to download until the end of December. So, the idea of demo fests and fests in general just being places where you put out demos is seemingly growing, and it seems like it's just a great way for different storefronts to pretend like they're having a sale when they really aren't having a sale. It is pushing the industry, I think, in the right direction, though, that games should have demos, even if there is perhaps a reality that very few people actually download and play demos. For instance, the kid I gave a Steam Deck to, I don't think he would ever bother to install a demo because the family share of games available to him are way too high. Plus, he may not even be allowed to go to the storefront and install demos, so he may only be, yeah, he's probably only allowed to play games that I've already shared with him. That would make all the sense in the world. Be kind of crazy if you could just go and download a demo of some mature game. But yeah, even if he was allowed, I don't think he would do that. And I would never personally install a demo on a game. Yeah, I would either play one of the games I already have or buy the new game when it's available. Let's see, Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 gets free Stranger Things DLC that lets players fly around Hawkins in a helicopter. The expansion adds 5 missions and 40 locations from the show. Okay. It's probably a very weird crossover, though, in that you, I assume, can never land or walk around or otherwise see any locations from like a ground level perspective. It doesn't seem like you're playing as any recognizable characters, but maybe you are. I haven't watched the most recent Stranger Things, so maybe all the characters have drastically changed in appearance. I've heard they have, in that they are now adults and probably not as good actors as you would want for their age. Yeah. So it does seem like you're picking up some people in the upside down. And that's as close to being on the surface as you're probably gonna get. You could see how that game could be a completely different experience if it wasn't tied into Microsoft Flight Simulator. And certainly that smacks in the face of Microsoft Flight Simulator being the bastion of realistic simulation of flying, as there is no Stranger Things city and no upside down. Like, if this trend were to continue, you're gonna very quickly have Flight Simulator have DLC for Halo and Doom and things like that. And frankly, they may already have DLC for that, or fly around as a dragon in Tamriel and Skyrim. Yeah. Maybe they've already crossed that line and done that before, but it seems like a weird choice. And it seems like the kind of thing that you would probably want to avoid. That way you don't create an odd tonal shift in your game and the way your game is marketed. 2 of December's major PlayStation Plus game catalog titles have been leaked. Extra and premium members should be able to access them next week. Looks like it's an Assassin's Creed game. Assassin's Creed Mirage. Is that the remake or soft reboot of Assassin's Creed? I heard that they're calling it a love letter to the original Assassin's Creed game. Which, yeah. Even by the second Assassin's Creed game, you were doing fairly different types of gameplay from the first game. Other game seems to be Wulong Fallen Dynasty. Yeah. I'll leave it at that. It might be a mistake, frankly, to have no gap at the top or bottom, but I don't think so at the moment. As long as I scroll to the bottom, everybody should be able to see most of the text. Not that I'm really expecting people to pause the screen and read the text. Let's see. Here we have a quote, meaningful, not incremental, end quote. Call of Duty will no longer release back-to-back Black Ops or Modern Warfare games. For some of you, the franchise has not met your expectations fully. Yeah, if only Battlefield would take the same message. I was just watching a YouTube video during the last break, talking, at least speculating around how a lot of these games have been big flops, and that a big part of that is that there was just huge expectations of continued large numbers and growth to stay the way they were back in COVID times when people were stuck at home and had nothing else they could do, and that a lot of the layoffs are speculated to have been coming from them over scaling up and hiring too many people during COVID. I don't think I 100% agree with that thought. I think these layoffs were in the works and planned for decades, and I think inherently all businesses for modern times, at least 40 or 50 years, have had a number one strategy of acquiring companies and getting the stock valuation higher and higher, and then laying off people and replacing them with cheaper, less skilled workers. All of that now culminating to their plan of just replacing everybody with AI. There has just been a class war that's been going on for at least 50 years, probably a lot longer, between rich management, upper management in particular, and everyone below them, as far as trying to lay off people and trying to reduce headcount and reduce payroll. And I think video games, being a particularly artistic based medium, have fallen in the trap of becoming far too much corporatized when they definitely should have been more free, open art co-ops. Which, yeah, weirdly, I don't think you can actually make an art co-op and succeed, where you had just multiple game developers that shared a single office, shared the same hardware. I just think you'd have to secure your code too much, and you would be spending too much time on the hardware. At best, I could see a art collective co-op that had 3 or 4 times the number of computers that one company might use, and then you might have 2 shifts in which one company might come in during the night and develop on something versus the other to optimize usage of those computers. But even then, that doesn't really make sense. It would make more sense if it was an art co-op where 3 or 4 game companies were in the same building talking to each other, and at some point there, why isn't that just one company? Yeah, it would have to be small indie developers, really, who didn't want to become part of a corporation. Yeah, and that'd be an interesting thought to try and do something like that, but I think the financials behind it and the cost and expenses behind it would be overwhelming. Yeah, and the savings perhaps not that high, in that maybe you're not paying for multiple copies of Windows licenses and things like that. But yeah. Moving on. I don't want to ramble too much. Let's see. The mystery behind the Game Awards statue appears to have been solved. The statue seems to be promoting a new game by Larian Studios. About a week or 2 ago, a real-world statue was taken a picture of and augmented reality teased as a mystery. I think this is probably in-game artwork here, because I really question how you could do this in the real world, but there might be a way. So Larian Studios was, I think, the maker of Baldur's Gate. It had people, demons, dragons, and such growing out of it, which led to a whole bunch of speculation. They specifically shot down, claimed that it was a Diablo 4 expansion. Yeah. There have been some new trademarks with Divinity logos, so the assumption is that this is a new Divinity game that's going to be announced. Which, yeah, what does that really matter at all? like the real announcement is going to happen at the Game Awards here in just a few hours. So why not just wait for the real announcement instead of being led by the nose on this parlor trick of trying to build up hype? And inherently, when you have something like this happen, it tends to mean that they're going to have either no trailer at all or a very short trailer to announce something. You may literally just see a logo and that's it, but no in-game footage or anything like that would be my guess. Moving on, PlayStation's Saros and Last of Us co-director's new game have been confirmed for Video Game Awards. Both games will appear during the show this week. Yep. Yeah, it takes place Thursday, December 11th, so tomorrow. Yep. Which makes a stream like this one of the worst streams to watch, I have to admit, in that we really are just getting a lot of video game news that are announcements for announcements, and they're holding back on saying anything until either during the Game Awards or after the Game Awards. BAFTA Games reveals its 2026 long list with Our Creators and Dispatch in contention for Best Games. Indiana Jones, Claire Obscura, Silksong, and more also on the BAFTA long list. Is Video Game Awards going to have a nice long list? No, because it's, well, I suppose it's as good as it's going to get. There's just a really long list here of games, which is basically just a naming anything. Saw Game Grumps play Lego Party. Looks like it's a decent enough Mario Party clone that you can actually play on PC or Steam Deck. Yeah, not seeing anything that's particularly surprising on this list. These are all largely well-known games. Blueprints is perhaps the most obscure one amongst the group. Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced has been listed on PEGI's website. Ubisoft has still to officially confirm the long-rumored remake even exists. Never played the original Black Flag, so it might be a small excuse to push me to playing the original Black Flag, but honestly, I don't know if I really feel the need. Like, there is a real logical argument that the first 4 games of Assassin's Creed are the games I enjoyed, and there's just no need to continue going through the series. The Elder Scrolls Skyrim Anniversary Edition has shadow dropped for the Switch 2 with a free upgrade for Switch players. Now, I imagine there isn't actually any new content here, and this is just Switch 2 getting the remaster from 2021. One of the things I have realized about the Steam Deck is its battery is not particularly super great either. Like, for a handheld computer, it's probably amazing, but realistically, I'm dragging down the battery life at least once per day, down to 15%, probably twice per day if I'm playing a lot of Balatro on it. So, you'd think Balatro would be something that would be more optimized to not take as much battery life, but I don't know. It does seem like it's not really that great of a battery life. I wish we had just like nuclear batteries and everything, and they would just last for a lifetime. Particularly now, since there's so much legislation in the European Union in particular that has led to most batteries being built in and not replaceable things, and instead being rechargeable things. Here we have a quote: "Lots of games get sold out of the Game Awards," end quote. "There's been a balance between reveals and awards. There has to be a balance between reveals and awards," Keeley says. "Both are important," he says, "because people come for the announcements, but then buy the award winners." Well, I don't know. I don't know people. I don't know their spending habits. I'd be very interested to see any actual survey numbers that actually did point out or prove that people actually do buy these games that win awards, which are pretty well known and pretty old by the time they are getting Game Awards. If that was the thought, then you would think you would have Game Awards almost every month in that case. which certainly the Game Awards could try and do something like that every month. And for a YouTube channel, if you were going to just treat it like a YouTube channel, you definitely want it to do something every month. I think it's probably much more likely that for the small number of people who actually watch the Emmys or the Oscars, they may actually go and watch a movie on demand or on streaming after they hear about it for the first time during those awards. But I think gamers are so quick that if they haven't played something like Expedition 33 now, they just have too many other games that are newer to consider playing, or less likely to jump back and play an older game. Moving on, now the PlayStation Store has accidentally revealed that Resident Evil Veteran will be coming to Requiem. It's a separate character from the one mentioned earlier in the potential GameStop leak. I assume Veteran is going to be a Raccoon City character from like Resident Evil 2 or 3. There's a character named Honk a long time ago. They're suspecting it's Leon Kennedy, which, yeah, it does feel like that Leon S. Kennedy may very well be the new hero that is going to stick around for a while in the Resident Evil series. Here we have GameStop may have accidentally leaked a second playable character, Resident Evil Requiem character, listing the game's deluxe edition mentions costumes for someone other than Grace. Yeah. See, this feels fairly typical too, is that for one reason or another, there is just this need to have a male protagonist character, potentially a male, I assume, also as a playable character in a video game. Which, heck, I mean, what can I say about that? There are just, around the world, some people are sexist and are not comfortable / not happy about playing as a female character. They cannot get their head around that. Okay. Not worth arguing whether it's right or wrong, just saying people are like that. And the game industry begrudgingly knows that, but doesn't want to really admit that. For a game like Requiem, as it's being presented, it feels like for the first half of at least one run, Grace is probably going to be fleeing a lot more than fighting. But if it's anything like Resident Evil 4, by the second half of one run, there's a decent chance she'll be doing a lot more fighting than fleeing. Otherwise, it stops being an action game altogether. You could certainly see that maybe there would be a new game plus where you play as, say, Leon S. Kennedy, and then all of a sudden you're playing the same game, but you have a lot more health and a lot more weapons, and you are just fighting a lot more. And certainly by the second or third playthrough of Resident Evil 4, you're so overpowered that fighting is more of an arcadey experience than a horror experience. Which maybe that is the logical move, is to realize that horror games generally don't sell well, and you should just make an action game with horror elements that become trivial as you continue to play the game. Let's see. Next, we have a Video Games Chronicle article that says Disney's lawyers blocked Star Wars KOTOR 2's restored content DLC from appearing on Switch, an inability to credit all the monitors who worked on the DLC spooked the Disney's legal team. Which, I suspect that is just why a lot of fan mods, which is what it seems like it was, don't go anywhere. And for KOTOR 2, it seems like this mod is adding a decent amount of content. Sorry, I'm yawning. Yeah, the trade-off certainly, I guess, is that while I am maybe accomplishing more these days, a big part of that may be staying up until 3 or 4 in the morning every night. I am staying up till 3 or 4 in the morning every night, and that doesn't put me in a good position to be available and awake during normal human hours. Next, we have a headline. The quote, future of Tomb Raider, end quote, will be revealed at the Game Awards. Crystal Dynamics announced 3 years ago that it started working on a new Tomb Raider. So, 3 years into the development of a game, they should have a decent amount of game to show. And frankly, they are probably in a hurry to release something, considering them being sold off from Square Enix and I think Embracer Group, that they probably are rushing to release something. So I wouldn't be surprised if they show off a trailer and then announce a release date of sometime in 2026, probably Christmas season of 2026. And one would expect that the game is going to look gorgeous, and the trailer is going to make it look gorgeous. The question certainly is how much like the old Tomb Raider game can a Tomb Raider game be, and how much like the new Tomb Raider reboot, the previous reboot. Now this will be a reboot on a reboot. It can be. In general, I think there will be platforming. Maybe we won't see a giant climbing axe as an aspect. I really hope we don't see a bow. Kind of don't feel like we even saw her with a machete that much. We want to see her shooting guns like the original Tomb Raider. And yeah, we want Lara Croft to be less of a survivor getting cut up and bruised and more of a femme fatale Indiana Jones who looks cool while potentially being cut up and bruised. Yeah, I guess inherently you could boil it down to Indiana Jones always has his trademark hat. He always looks cool. He always has the whip. He always has the guns. I'm specifically talking about the first 3 Indiana Jones movies here. Whereas Lara Croft in the reboot does not have her iconic guns, does not have the iconic hot pants, does not have the iconic t-shirt, and definitely does not have the cool personality. So if you take Indiana Jones and strip him of his cool gun and whip and hat and make him act completely different, how much of Indiana Jones are you really showing at that point? Yeah. So we're hoping also, I guess, for probably more magical stuff. There really wasn't that much in the reboot series. It would always show up at the very end of an experience. where it would have been 99% non-magical up until that point. Maybe more animals, less hunting just normal deer, more fighting rabid bears and things like that. Would be appreciated. Lara Croft is one of the few games, though, that has been established as having a female protagonist, so it would be somewhat weird to have a male protagonist. But heck, that might be revolutionary too. To straight up say, hey, we're going to have Larry Croft as a playable character. You could piss off a bunch of people doing that, certainly, and satisfy almost nobody by canonically saying that if you choose this option, you must admit that it's Lara Croft after having full transitioning transgender surgery. That would probably not go over particularly well, but it would be kind of funny. It's like, yes, this game series that is known for Lara Croft, we're gonna kowtow to the economics of it and add a male playable character that is just Lara Croft in a beard. Moving on to the Gematsu articles. Let's continue to make progress here. This one, I think, yep, I have to have it zoomed in that way. And see, weirdly, that slide does work. So I don't know why the other slide didn't work. Now it doesn't. I feel like, oh shoot, clicked the wrong button there. I clicked the home button and I have the home button still programmed to open up all of these default pages. That's going to move all of my markers away. Yeah. So I don't know what's going on. Sometimes it's loading correctly, sometimes it isn't. We'll just have to move forward without our interstitial slides, which isn't a big loss. Nintendo 64 Classics adding Rayman 2 The Great Escape and Tonic Trouble on December 17th. We already talked about that. Hell Let Loose Vietnam gameplay reveal trailer is available on Gematsu. 50 versus 50 first person shooter. We can make a YouTube short on that, I guess. R-Type Dimensions 3 announced for modern consoles, Switch and PC. It is kind of funny to know that there was a R-Type series decades ago, and instead of them potentially trying to make a 4 or 5 or 6, which may already exist, they are, I assume, releasing a remaster of 3. The hiccups now. There might be something more going on than just remastering the graphics. It does look like it's a very busy, fast-paced game. There you can see what it looked like originally. Yeah, I just don't know, like, why these types of games were ever as popular as they were. It just seems like they were actively being designed to suck quarters away from people and be way more difficult than I think most people would want. But certainly they do have some historical relevancy. Yeah. I saw slick deals for Stellar Blade, I believe, on sale. Thought about getting it at 40% off. It's not a hugely great deal, but yeah. I don't see a real reason to grab it at the moment. Clover Pit is coming to iOS and Android on December 17th. It's already available for Xbox Series, Xbox One, and PC. We can see it's rated very positively here. So we can see in this checkbox, I'm going to have to tweak the visuals and the formatting somewhat too to make all of this line up in a nice centered, vertically centered way. That's all aesthetics though, so getting the code to work and be rock solid is the first move, certainly. Taito Milestones 4 has been announced for Switch due out March 26th in Japan. I assume this is several Taito games. Let's watch the trailer, see what they are. Taito, another old video game developer company that's probably been acquired multiple times. Although it doesn't inherently have to be multiple times, it could just have been acquired once. Once is enough to destroy the real soul of any company and lose most of the employee base. I would argue that Arkanoid is another game that's actually very difficult to play. A big part of that certainly is in the original arcade. You would have a spin dial to control the paddle, which would give you more precise control. Telemetry looks a lot like Marble Mash and Ski. These games are so boring that they're not even wanting to show them for very long. Yeah. Water ski. I did see an interesting Slick Deal sale as I look at my phone while not really paying attention to this trailer, where it was like a box set of all the How to Train Your Dragon books, which I assume means that they are the remakes of the books and the edited versions of the books, not the How to Kill a Dragon series that it was originally about. Apparently the movies are fairly different from what the books are, so I'm not sure what you'd really be getting in that box set. Yeah, I'm starting to see what feels like a slightly increased number of sales around book box sets, manga box sets, things like that. But slight discount is about all you would ever really get, and you're still going to be spending a ton of money. Let's see. Gear Club Unlimited 3 launches February 19th, 2026 for the Switch 2, and then later in 2026 for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. It's a new playground for car enthusiasts, says the director. Let's see if these images still slide around. We have gotten that to work. Good. I don't think I'm gonna bother to watch the trailer though. Let's see. Dragon Quest VII Reimagined has a character trailer for Ruff. I assume that's this wolf character. Which, yeah. Definitely don't need to watch every single trailer for every single character. Yeah. Dragon Quest VII Reimagined. Could be a huge seller, but I think you might very well see at the Video Game Awards them fail to show and promote this game, being a Square Enix Japanese game. Partly that's Square Enix's fault, and as such, any hope that this is even known about in the Western world is going to be slightly diminished. Whereas in Japan, I imagine this might sell very well, although maybe not. Maybe the newest generations of Dragon Quest fans just don't care about 7, or maybe the newest generation of gamers just don't care about Dragon Quest in general. Inti Creates announces Kingdom's Return, Time-Eating Fruit, and the Ancient Monster for modern consoles, the Switch, and PC. That's interesting how that didn't have a comma after it. I'll have to look at that later. Let's see, do we have a trailer to watch? Let's watch it. Still, overall, there's not a lot of sales going on. Of course, I still managed to find plenty to spend things on. Yeah. Yeah, this looks like a city builder in part. So yeah, side-scrolling events where you're fighting and that being your main gameplay mechanic. Then you go back to your base and level up your base. Feels somewhat like how some of the mobile games have been in the past. But this doesn't really look like this would have been a mobile game. Yeah. And yeah, I think the era of having mobile games, like Simpsons Tapped Out for instance, has died in favor of focusing in on more gameplay and less play it for 5 minutes and then have to come back 24 hours later. Yep. Does not really feel that interesting of a gameplay mechanic. Although I kind of like the pixely art style a little bit. We'll make a YouTube short on it. EVO 2026 and EVO Japan 2026 title lineups have been announced, 12 games each with no extended lineups. These are fighting game tournaments, and so it might give us a slight idea of what people are playing at EVO at least. 2XKO. First time appearing. Several things have been here 3 times. Invincible Versus is first time appearing. It seems like they are actively trying to introduce some more new games. Vampire Savior, the Legend of the Vampire, Virtual Fighter 5 Revo. Yeah, Street Fighter 6 is the, I guess, oldest series, with Guilty Gear Strive being the second oldest series. Yeah. Melty Blood type Lumina, not showing up in the non-Japan Evo. I'll leave it at that. Rivals of Aether 2 adds La Reina on January 6, 2026, the Crowd Magnet. I assume this is a fighting game. Yeah. Adding a new character. And you can see in the last 30 days this is getting mixed reviews. I think part of the reason why it's getting mixed reviews is that it's effectively feels like it's still just in early access and they're not developing it. In its current state, it's a rough beta. I cannot recommend a game in its current state. That was yesterday. Yeah. Let's see, Roadout launches March 12th. And I wish I knew a trick to stop yawning. I think the trick was to take several deep breaths. And while I'm playing a trailer, it's not a terrible time to do something like that. Okay, so you'll have to tell me if you could hear me taking deep breaths that whole time. That is fairly awkward to sit there and not say anything during that whole time, just trying to catch my breath up. I yawned several times too while taking those deep breaths, so I'm not sure if that really is a good strategy or not. People often do yawn when they aren't getting enough oxygen, but that's kind of the issue here. Maybe let me run on my cheap $10 smartwatch, which I will always refer to it as that. Just see what it says I am at blood oxygen. Now, up until this point, I've had this watch for maybe a month now at most. It has never said anything but 99% on the blood oxygen meter. But yeah, I didn't hear myself taking deep breaths there, breathing in or out into the microphone. Yeah, it says I'm at 98%, which is lower than 99, but not really in the danger zone. Like 96%, 95% I think is a danger zone for oxygen. And the body is very good, a working body at least is very good at maintaining oxygen levels. And I've noticed that more recently in hospitals they love to take people off of oxygen, even if they definitely feel like they should be on oxygen, and that they are trying to force humans to adapt, I think, more. Or maybe they're just trying to straight up save some bucks on oxygen generation, not that that's really expensive. Moving on, Gamatsu says Mariachi Legends launches in 2026 for the PS5, Xbox Series, Switch, and PC. Looks like an interesting side-scrolling game. I want to watch the trailer on this. Okay, so again, we have an intro video that looks completely different from what the actual game is going to look like. Interesting kind of Spanish opera music is what I describe it as. Yeah. Nice colorful mariachi looks. There is still a lack, I would say, of Central American, Spanish, Mexican style stories and games. And of the couple of them that I've seen, they tend to be like this, in that it's side-scrolling platforming gameplay. Yeah. And I guess mariachi in particular is just a small part of those many different cultures. So, yeah. But yeah, there really still feels like there's a too small of a number of Latino characters, Latino targeted games, Latin American targeted games. This is part of the Latin American Game Showcase, even. Let's just click on that and see what that does for us. Nothing. But yeah, there's also just, I think, a problem with all minorities always. Okay, so here we have the adult section popping up for this game, even though the first few pixels, I changed it and probably should change it back. First few tags here don't have any of the offending tags. It's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. It's not till you get to the very bottom that nudity would trigger the adult content. And this shows what I've done with the code. And I clearly need a button to cancel that and make it not happen that way. So I need to change the pop-up, because every single image on this page is just being blocked. So if this was truly an adult game, it would feel like we would be safe to do this. Like, you can go to full screen, it won't show the image. You can toggle around, it won't show the image, it's not showing the thumbnail. So it would just be pure text. Now, the problem here is that YouTube still doesn't really love text. So if I was trying to just talk about an adult game, that's still something YouTube does not really like and might strike my channel or delete my channel in general for. So this gives me a nice level of cover, and maybe it would be nicer if the images were blurred, but that's more difficult than just telling it to not display altogether. I'd have to spend a lot more effort to do that, to blur the thumbnail and the images and the little screenshots, and then like recommendation parts are also blurred in this whole aspect. But at the moment, what I would do is just toggle that off, and then that will let us see the screenshots as they are. Yeah. I suspect there isn't actually any nudity in this game, and the game is getting just hosed by somebody jokingly putting the wrong tags on it. I wouldn't be surprised if there are straight up trolls that are trying to ruin other competitors by putting adult tags on them. I don't know if that even really works for people, but yeah. You can see these little images also didn't load. And none of the recommendations loaded either. Now, I do think, though, well, first of all, the script has got all of my code for Steam pages in it. I do think, though, that Mariachi Legends would still be able to be added to my YouTube Shorts in this form factor. No, I don't think I'm changing the page enough. It's already had a YouTube short potentially made for it, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah, based on the name and the look of focusing on a car, this game started off feeling really uninteresting to me, but as I watched the trailer and actually saw the gameplay, I became much more interested in it. Moving on, a 2D platforming boss rush action game called Onikura is going to be published by Astrolabe Games. Let's see. We have another trailer. Let's do that. I'm going to stand up while this trailer plays, so I'll be back in a sec. Okay, I'm back. So, yeah, just doing that even, maybe. The wise move is to stand up for a second, stretch just a little bit. This looked interesting enough. Feels like it might be more of a boss rush fight than a full-on Metroidvania type game. Moving on, Shade Protocol Kickstarter campaign launches in the spring of 2026. Latest look at the 2D cyber fantasy Metroidvania game. Yeah, for as many Metroidvania games that come out, I really don't play as many of them as I should. Now would probably be a decent time to potentially play something like that. That was a very interesting effect to split the whole screen in half like that. It seems like she's fighting with a guitar half the time. Oh. And they're going for big scale on some of this. So definitely feels like a different theme, different art style take on a Metroidvania game. Yeah, it definitely sounds intriguing, or looks intriguing. Just played a bunch of music around that. Still not sure why some of these pages are slightly wider than narrower than others. It does just seem like it's based on how much text is here. There's a weird thing about these Steam pages, by the way, that in the HTML code you would think the thing on the left side would have come first, and usually that is the case, but this comes first. Like, all of this is in the code before this is, and I assume that's because eventually, if you zoom in big enough, it starts to look like this, where this wraps around. But you would kind of think it would be the other way around in almost every other case. Moving on, Spaceman Memories launches April 15th. It's a retro-style turn-based RPG being dated. This is all pre-announcement stuff coming from the Game Awards, I would imagine. Either influenced by the Game Awards or one of the mini fests happening before the Game Awards, full of games that are doomed to be forgotten about because they weren't big enough to secure funding and to advertise in the Game Awards. Which, by the way, that is the thing Jeff Keighley definitely did not mention, is that they make a ton of money running ads as in the forms of trailers for games during the Game Awards. Otherwise, there would be nothing funding them. Unlike any kind of E3 awards that could have been funded by ESA and the ESRB. But for the most part, even the ESRB was being funded in part by the E3, back when E3 existed. Anyways, moving on, Colorbound demo is now available. Test out the colorful puzzle platformer. Here we have another Latino looking game, which I assume was also during that same presentation. Interesting contrasting color mixing game mechanic. One thing to certainly mention, though, is that you're probably not experiencing the best you can experience as far as video games if Latino games only get talked about and are released based off of one small fest that's crammed together with several other small fests. Alright. I'm not 100% sure that gimmick is going to work, but it is something worth giving a try, certainly. Here we have Spaceman Memories. It's probably not a game I would play. Here we have Colorbound, which I might play. The game Letters to Arala is coming to the Switch in Q1 of 2026. It's currently available for PC. From that name, I'd assume it was some kind of visual novel, but they say it's an adventure game. Yeah. And this was definitely not what I was expecting. Looks interesting enough, and it's already on my wish list. Apparently I saw it September 19th. It is over 30 reviews, but not by much for something that's been out for a couple of months. But yeah, there's nothing else to really do with that. Tito launches in Q2 of 2026 for the PS5, Switch, and PC. Let's see what this is. I'm still really feeling the effects of moving that tree sapling, and really I would just like to lie down for 3 or 4 more hours at least. Yeah. I have also like a ton of packages outside I need to actually bring inside, which even that can often be a separate little side project. Okay, this looks like this has got a lot of weird stuff going on. So it's caught my attention. It's already on the follow list, so it's already caught my attention. Detopia, a puzzling endeavor gameplay trailer. A futuristic world where happiness is curated by artificial intelligence. As in dystopia. I guess that's what Detopia stands for. We can't even at the moment trust AI to be accurate or consistent. Why in the world would you think an AI would be capable of managing the whimsical levels of happiness that a human might have? Now the problem here is this looks like this is probably 99% single unity puzzle game, and then they're cramming in a almost completely disconnected visual novel story into a puzzle game. That's what it feels like. I could be wrong about that, certainly. But it does seem like they're probably spending too much energy on a narrative and a story, and not enough energy on a gameplay mechanic to match that narrative and story, if you're going to have that amount of story. Rhythm Mini Games Collection Bits and Bops is now available for PC. Okay. As someone who has no rhythm, this is probably not a game I would think too hard about playing. It does feel like it is a WarioWare smooth moves type experience, but it also feels like you are only playing 20 minigames, when I think 60 would be about the minimum for any kind of quick game like this, which I assume it's a quick game. So yeah, it's interesting they're selling on their own engine, and the idea that anyone can play is questionable. I think a big problem with a lot of rhythm games, though, are that they're too difficult. Utopia here. Definitely on the screenshot looks a lot more like an adventure game and a lot less like a single screen puzzle game. So yeah, maybe that trailer is just doing it a disservice, or maybe that trailer is more accurately depicting the amount of puzzles in it. Let's see, a Y2K era Japan electronics repair shop simulator Restore has been announced for PC. I don't know how many Japanese stores are repair shops. Imagine there's some of that. Now, I played Electrician Simulator maybe a month or two ago, and there was a decent amount of fixing things in the whole mix. So I might be interested in repairing some of these more microelectronics type devices. Although the reality is that most of these devices just cannot really be repaired, and it would be cheaper just to buy a used new model. The parts are not going to be available, and the effort of soldering and desoldering elements are too much to really to spend money on. Those Vitas, or yeah, I think those are Vitas, or PlayStation Portables, are notorious for having their batteries being ballooned up and exploded. You definitely have to have specific nostalgia for the specific devices. If none of these devices hit that metric for you, then this is a game that's not going to really be that interesting to you. What's interesting is this says it's the English trailer, but it's a Japanese person speaking in Japanese the whole time. I don't think Tiny Build is actually a Japanese company, so they definitely could have had a English dub going on there. Setting this specifically in Japan doesn't really mean much of anything, particularly when the character in your thumbnail is a blonde-haired girl, which you really wouldn't see in Japan. Let's see, the bug catching and matchmaking adventure Catchmaker has been announced for PC. Catch bugs and match them for the perfect romance. Now, is matching them really just a family-friendly version of forced breeding, mating, and sex? These are these are very much weird characters that are not of the same species, so they really wouldn't be able to mate. So we're starting to see a trend here of weird gameplay mechanic mixed with completely disconnected gameplay mechanic. In part, this looks like they've just made a simplistic bug catching game and throwing in a weird dating sim element. Yeah. Which maybe that is in part because of the increased censorship on Steam, is that they're just taking what would have been more traditional dating sim games that would have gone in the more mature adult nature, and dumbed them down with family-friendly graphics and insects instead of humans dating, and simplistic bug catching gameplay mechanics instead of what a dating sim might have, which is usually no gameplay mechanics at all. Yeah, that's a hard thing to believe about that game in particular, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are going to be a few adult games that all of a sudden get shifted into non-adult games halfway through development in the next few years, though it would take for them to actually come out. Moving on, Capybara Game announces an augmentative and alternate communication adventure game called Find Your Words for PC. So, is this the idea that the characters are less than verbal? See, this is probably one of these characters that can't speak at all, and they point to pictures as far as what they're saying as far as this character. And then this person in this wheelchair may not be able to speak without the assistance of a computer. So these are heavily disabled people from the looks of it. At least some of them. Let's actually watch the trailer and see if it's all of them. Again, feels pretty family friendly. So, yeah. I imagine there is summer camps that are particularly for disabled people, but I'm not sure that there's really a case of that being a good idea, since everybody's disability is going to be fairly different. At the end there, they said this game was created by two dads inspired by their child's non-speaking journey. Which, yeah, that would be an example of having real passion about the game you're making and why something like this would get made, whereas a publisher and Microsoft would never really fund the development of a game like this. Although it feels like you are going to actually find more words to use, which is not really how a communication book like that would work, as far as I understand. You can kind of see also why some of these games, not only because they wouldn't be able to buy advertising during the Video Game Awards, but just also why they wouldn't in general be good fits for the mainstream audience of people who are watching the Video Game Awards. I'm not even going to call them gamers, because I'm not sure everybody watching the Video Game Awards really are falling under the category of calling themselves gamers. Moving on, Fishbowl launches April 2026. It's a narrative adventure game. Another game with kind of pixely thumbnail. And then it looks like an RPG maker type game for the most part. Yeah. Looks like it's a Indian culture. It seems like there's several mini games going on here. This was part of a Wholesome Games Presents event. So yeah, I'll give that a chance. Maybe something, maybe not. A board game inspired puzzle narrative game Travel Pack was announced for consoles and PC. I did say that today's stream and probably Friday's stream is going to just be really, really long. Of course, I don't have any way of making myself be able to really tolerate it anymore. I'm still very uncomfortable in my chair and tending to lean one way or the other. So I'm not really getting how this puzzle game works. It is a slightly different art style in that you are making these 3D figurine type characters that are squishy and bopping up and down and squishing on themselves to animate. Imagine any kind of bones infrastructure system falls apart when you try to have characters like that animate that way. Cozy Caravan adds Apple Arcade version launching January 8th in 2026. Don't recognize Cozy Caravan if it's available on some other platforms. A pink cow is an interesting take on cows. This definitely has an Animal Crossing type feel to it. They say they love to craft, explore, and share, which only two of those sound like gameplay mechanics. This is another cozy game. I'm getting fairly concerned about so many cozy games in that I just think people are reaching potentially their breaking point of stress. Yeah, Cozy Games is responding to that. Let's see, Spirit Crossing adds a PC version. PC's version is going to be published independently by Spry Fox. This is another game I don't think I've seen before. I want to get through all the Gamatsu articles before taking another break. I'm not sure I'm going to really make it. I still feel like there's too many games where the concept is just to play a survival gameplay mechanic or do random things with your friends and find your own fun. This is a fairly different art style, but it definitely feels like I'd want a main goal for a game like this. But then I'd also want a single player option, which I'm not sure you're really going to get, although you probably will. Then it played the whole Netflix logo, and they've changed that jingle, haven't they? It sounds different now than it originally did. Things are just out of order as far as tabs being open. Let's see. Lush post-apocalyptic adventure game Verdant has been announced for PC. I think we're gonna watch this trailer, and then yeah, there seems to just be a ton more Gematsu articles. Weirdly, it doesn't seem like there's any gaming on Linux articles. I feel like my macro is just broken, but maybe there just aren't any gaming on Linux articles. That is also a possibility. Right, that announcement trailer's not really showing us too much. Okay. So yeah, we still got a ton of Gematsu articles to go through. So I'm gonna decide to take another few minutes of break, and I'll be back after that. Okay, I'm back. This is gonna be a long journey. I think we probably shouldn't be watching all the trailers, but it's hard to pick and choose winners and losers like that in my mind. Alright, so our next Gematsu article is Moomin Troll Winter's Warmth. Moomin 80 trailer is available. I'd assume that this is a sequel to this. Let's see if we could maybe speed up things. Yeah. The Moomins are like a Swedish comic or something. One of those countries around Sweden. Apparently the stories were written in 1940s. This is the first time I've seen an in-screen pop-up happen. Is that because I was playing it back at 2 times the speed? Yeah. And there's really not a lot to say when it playing back at that speed. Let's go back to normal speed. Yeah. They really don't give you a great example of what it is. It's an adventure game, getting from point A to point B, it looks like. This is funny. It says if you want to know more about the game, follow and wishlisted on Steam, which, of all the things following and wishlisting does do, I would say that is not one of them. Yeah, I would not say you're guaranteed to have any higher chance of knowing anything. But yeah, it looks like it's a point and click adventure that may have some relevancy based on Moomin Troll being a character that's recognizable, although may not be that relevant, really. Wildflowers is now available for the PS5 and Xbox Series. Okay. Let's assume some things and see what it looks like on Steam and not watch the trailer. And then turn out to be totally wrong about what I assumed the game was going to be. I kind of thought it was just going to be a flower picking simulator game, but instead, it's an overwhelmingly positive game on Steam. Interesting. Wild Society first look trailer. I wonder if this is a series of games or if this is just what they're naming several different games. I saw one developer I clicked on that makes adult games, and they had the longest list of games they either create or published that I've ever seen. It definitely feels like those kinds of game publishers put out a lot of games. So the theme, as far as the wild, does seem to be lesbianism and maybe magic too. Yeah. Interesting, I suppose. I question, though, the actual gameplay mechanic. And this character here, let's go back one, does look suspiciously dressed like the female secondary protagonist of BioShock Infinite. Although, I don't even know if that's the best way to describe that character. Let's see, a new Divinity logo and symbols trademarked matching the Mystery Game Awards 2025 statue. I think matching might be an exaggeration. Really? Lost and Found Company launches February 11th, 2026. It's a hidden object game being dated. I would be hard pressed to believe that a hidden object game would somehow feel that different from any other hidden object game that I would really want to give it the time of day. The sad fact is there's just way too many hidden object games out there on Steam that are all pretty low effort and not worth your time, because if you're going to do hidden object games, probably you're better off doing it from books. Now I do see that there's a unique animation style here and movement and story, so this is still several levels above what you normally would see in a hidden object game. But yeah, I'm still very iffy on something like that. Then a cozy thrift shop management simulation called Thrifty Business has been announced for PC. But yeah, just way too many cozy things. And all of the links to the Steam pages are like one tab to the right of where they should be. I imagine that's because of the pause timer to delay opening tabs too fast that I programmed. And I guess once I get all the programming going at the same time, that pause timer won't be an issue. Yeah. Or it may still actually be an issue. Actually, come to think of it, I'll just have to make sure that one pause timer is slower than the next. And that was not particularly exciting. But yeah, a lot of these cozy games are not that exciting. A wholesome claw machine game, Clawsome, is going to be published by Whitehorn Games. Okay. And then Showgunners is coming to PS4 and 5, Xbox Series, and Xbox One on February 19th, 2026. And boy, does this game look different than the cozy games we've been looking at before. This one has even an age-restricted trailer going on with it. This claw game is different than the last claw game I looked at. Feels more 3D, perhaps a little bit more complicated. Showgunners is already rated very positively. It's from 2023 is when it came out on the Steam. Yep. Let's see, 036 Studio and CCG Lab announced a Star Wars digital collectible card game for PC, iOS, and Android. Okay, that might be a big thing. It's going to come down to how much of this collectible card game is just rehashing previous Star Wars collectible card games, and then it comes down to what Star Wars do you cover and what Star Wars do you not cover, because there's definitely some Star Wars content that would be way better received than others, and very different audiences. Arguably, I think there's at least 3 different generations of fandom around Star Wars that are all interested in 3 completely different things from Star Wars. Star Wars as a universe is probably big enough to have a collectible card game, but it's certainly not pushing 1,000 Pokemon type characters like Pokemon Pocket TCG is, or 10,000 different cards like Yu-Gi-Oh is, which is far too many cards. Fairy Tale Dungeons is coming to Switch on January 7th, 2026, alongside a major update. I've been noticing my voice has been messing up more and more, and particularly with some of the episodes of Balacho, I start to talk and it's just coming out really weak, which that would be a big problem for me too, certainly, is if I just straight up lost my voice temporarily or permanently. I could probably adapt to word economy if I could just type and do text to speech instead of speaking if I totally lost my voice, but it would be very slow and I'd still have to be able to see the keyboard to type. So yeah, I don't want to end up the dumb, deaf, and blind kid, which I guess my hearing at the moment is pretty good, so one thing there. Moving on, let's see. Fairy Tale Legends is rated very positively. I haven't really delved deep into the Fairy Tale anime series though, so really couldn't say anything about it. Typically I can just say that most anime based games tend to kind of suck compared to the animes themselves. A cozy hand-painted adventure game called Sienna, A Tale of Spirits has been announced for modern consoles and PC. Yep, looks like it's an adventure game if I was to guess. Yeah. The chibi art style of this character kind of clashes with the school uniform here, because the uniforms based on whether they are in middle school, kindergarten, or high school or college tend to be fairly different. Do we really need to watch a trailer? Probably. You can even see in the intro video that the art style really doesn't match this CGI look. I don't know why so many people make adventure games. It definitely takes more work and makes a game feel longer, and maybe that makes it feel like the game is more worth it. But I definitely think the audiences, the gamers in general, are getting busier and busier and have never really had a good habit of beating games all the way to the end. So I don't know why you need the extra grind. You really don't have a lot of people saying, oh, this game is too short on 5-hour games, on the few 5-hour games that get made. Elder Scrolls V Skyrim Anniversary Edition now available for the Switch 2. We already covered that and talked about that. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Splintered Fate is coming to the Switch 2 on December 16th. I'd assume that this is a somewhat new game. Yeah. This looks like a new game. I don't know if the first game well, I don't know. I guess this is its own standalone game. Yeah. You can definitely tell this is more of the newer animation styles of Ninja Turtles. Yeah. Definitely feel more computer generated and less hand drawn. This is rated very positively on Steam. Pegging rates Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced. This image is really small. I should scale that up. I'll do that later. Let's see. LEGO Voyager's crossplay update is now available. Play with users across platforms. Okay, nice. Nice to know. You can see this game is overwhelmingly positive. Don't really have much more to say. Resident Evil Requiem PlayStation Store box art leak reveals Leon S. Kennedy. I assume that's him there. Now, what would kind of suck is if it turned out that Leon S. Kennedy is just the new bad guy for several sequels of Resident Evil, which is exactly what the bad guy, who the bad guy was for several of the sequels, and yeah, in Resident Evil 4 and 5 and I think 6 too. No, I don't think he was in 6. He was in 4 and 5. He may have been in 3 and 2 also as the bad guy. I think he was even in Resident Evil 1, so as a maybe good guy. Yeah. We're still waiting for Resident Evil Requiem to come out. But every single screenshot here screams horror survival and doesn't really imply that Leon S. Kennedy would be a good character to... Oh yeah, the frame rate on these still is terrible. There's definitely something wrong with the frame rate on Steam videos being played. Suppose you might have like Leon Kennedy as the shopkeeper, or maybe even the damsel in distress for the game. Let's see, a game called Rain 98 has been delayed to 2026. A message from the director Shun T. Seeing how we have a noose in the screen, I suspect there might be some censorship issues happening here. They're saying it's a quality issue, they just want to make sure it's good. Rain 98. That one screenshot, and looks like it's a psychological horror romance visual novel, if I was to guess. So it feels like it might have a few more things going for it than just your standard visual novel. And that's going to bring us to GameDeveloper.com articles. Major shareholder denounces Square Enix for sluggish revenue and profit margins in a 112-page presentation. Anybody who makes a 112-page presentation, that is definitely making a big statement I think they are making an argument for potentially a hostile takeover, and that they're trying to get the shareholders to probably vote out the board, put somebody else in charge, at the very least, if not actually lead to the acquisition of Square Enix. Honestly, if Sony somehow managed to acquire Square Enix, I'm not sure how bloodthirsty Sony really is to do something like that. It would then have several more games that are played on the PlayStation feel like they might be exclusive to the PlayStation. As far as Final Fantasy games and things like that. Nintendo would be upset about that, though, for Octopath Traveler at least, and may very well try to buy Square Enix if it was actually up for sale. The whole Warner Brothers Netflix acquisition with a hostile takeover bid coming out is a similar situation, and it seems like Paramount arguably submitted a better deal that would pay shareholders more. So if that's the case, then the shareholders might vote for it, but probably wouldn't. Remember, shareholders aren't really people. For the vast majority of shareholders, they are financial people who just listen to what the board suggests, or they are investment groups who usually just listen to what the board suggests also. Let's see. Take-Two has hired the Perfect Dark studio leads for a new team. The studio head Daryl Gallagher and creative director Brian Horton are starting a studio within 2K. Okay, but then they basically can't make a Perfect Dark game, and they proved they couldn't make a Perfect Dark game before that point. Anyways, this is perhaps more of an example of just how even middle management protects itself, and while these two big people get laid off, we won't ever get any stories of any of the lower associate level employees getting the same level of help. It is very much more about who you know than it is about what you can actually accomplish and do. And I'll leave it at that. Let's see. Pokemon TCG Pocket, Dredge, and Cyberpunk win Apple Game of the Year honors. Apple's Game of the Year list is largely divided by platform, with iPad, iPhone, and Mac, and Apple Vision Pro each naming their own best games. Okay. So, I'd assume Pokemon TCG Pocket was for iPhone. And then here's the Paramount bid for Warner Brothers was backed by EA Acquisition Group investors. I saw a joke where they're saying that Wacko and Dot and what's the other one's name? Yakko? The Warner Animaniacs characters have been fired and laid off from Warner Brothers. But yeah, we'll see how this goes as far as things go. Before I close this page though, I'm going to opt to jump back to Gaming on Linux. And then I'm going to click to page 1 here. Yeah, I just don't know where these tabs are going. And then I'm going to open these Gaming on Linux articles. Today's not really the greatest day to be opening up a bunch of things, but I do want to just stay up with the news. Let's open all of those. Just everything on page 1. Some of these stories we might have talked about, some of them maybe not. And then that'll give me a second to do just about nothing. There really is nothing I can do within this amount of time. As we watch tons of things get opened. Okay. And so we'll try and find a story that explains why these games are open now. Better than us. Dungeons of Dusk. Dark Side Detective, Backside of the Moon. Overwatch 2 Season 20 apparently is out. You can see it's mixed reviewed at 54%, and overall Overwatch 2 is at a pathetically low 25%. I guess Overwatch 2 is probably one of the lowest rated big games out there. Yep, they really just ruined Overwatch as a concept, and they probably should just give up and bring back Overwatch 1. That's really, I think, what people would want. Just not change anything at all, bring back Overwatch 1, try and regain an audience for potentially an Overwatch 3. I don't know why they're talking about Nuclear Throne. I didn't know I owned that game. You know. G Proton 1026 released with effects included and improvements for DLSS and game fixes. Let's see. Effects, I think, is the ARM attachment. Yeah. It is interesting how Valve keeps rebranding otherwise open source software and calling it something by a different name, but it's probably a good move overall, because if you didn't do that, there would just be too much confusion as to what specifically Valve is doing and making. Netflix wants to acquire Warner Brothers, but they have to fight off Paramount. We talked about that already to the extent I want to talk about that. Framework greatly expands their open source event and Linux distribution sponsorships. Framework trying to be a bigger player. Postal Bullet Paradise gets cancelled over generative AI with Goonswarm Games shutting down. Already talked about that. Team Fortress 2 Classic has become Team Fortress 2 Classified and arrives in January 30th. Name changes do make a good argument to making a new YouTube short. Discord gets improvements for video on Linux PCs and Steam Deck. Okay. I haven't tried video on Discord, so I don't know how well it worked before, and won't probably know how well it works now. Classic roguelike top-down shooter Nuclear Throne Major Update 100 is now out. Wow, 100 updates is quite a lot. And then there's Team Fortress 2 Classified. War Thunder is getting infantry combat. I suppose that interests that audience. Total War Medieval 3 has been announced by Creative Assembly. I think we may have already talked about that. Proton Experimental brings bug fixes for our creators to finals and various other games. Overwatch 2 with Season 20 has some very annoying crash bugs on Linux and SteamOS. I guess that's why they're talking about it. So, get ready for another adventure with the Dark Side Detectives Backside of the Moon. Okay. KDE's 2025 fundraising has been a huge success. Great. Hopefully that means they can actually speed up development and polishing of KDE. A social stealth narrative game, Better Than Us, is about creating a web of lies to steal from the ultra rich. Interesting premise. The retro first person shooter Dusk is getting a dungeon crawler with Dungeons of Dusk. Interesting. Hytale will run on Linux PCs via Flatpak, but Steam Deck will require more work. Factorio mod developer and Hooded Horse reveal a new automation game called Substructure. AMD FSR Redstone arrives with AMD FSR SDK 2.1. This is upscaling technology. NVIDIA announces a few changes to GeForce Now and new games for December. Yes, check out this article if you're really interested and you actually use GeForce Now. Open source XR runtime Monado 25.1.0 released with expanded hardware support. Okay. Move that around. Move that around. And we scroll all the way back to where we were. Then we move on. Now, at this point, I think we are just looking at new games that came out on Steam, so I'll say the usual. When I go like this, I'm leaving the tab open. When I put something on the follow list, I'm actually interested in it. When I swipe down, I'm closing the tab for whatever reason. Though that's not working here. Finals. Let's see, Dave bought something new. In the second to latest break I took, I brought in all of those boxes, subwoofers. They're individually wrapped and kind of heavier than I would expect them to be, which is a good sign for quality. But yeah, it does certainly say something that I'm willing to do some fairly physical activity in the middle of streaming just to avoid getting back to streaming. This is overwhelming me, frankly, the amount of streaming. I don't think we can expect too much to really change. My brain is turning as much as I speak, or in this case, don't speak. Yeah, I'm just sitting here in silence. And I think for perhaps the first time ever, I'm gonna just have to say enjoy the music and watch me visually go through all of these fairly quickly. Here we have one that has a prompt where it says English language not supported. That's as far as I've gotten the code so far. It's just to bring up the prompt, and apparently bring up the prompt twice, which is not useful. That is yet another thing that is of some use, is to be reminded that a game doesn't support English. And I guess it was somewhat a good thing that I started streaming earlier today. But honestly, if I'd started streaming an hour later, it wouldn't have probably changed too much. I still probably would have been yawning quite a bit and just not really having a lot to say. We see our first 5-6 game, which I don't even think that's the meme. I think it's 6-7, not 5-6. Here we have another game that is mixed reviewed and has sexual content way down here. I suspect it is an adult game. I'm noticing that videos, not images, still are playing. Yeah. So I'll work on my censorship forced upon me by YouTube system a little bit more. Yeah. Let's just hope there, for some reason, might not be that many games out today, which there's a small possibility that that's the case. I tell myself that, hurry up. I'm crashing fast. So yeah, for the rest of the day, I'm probably just gonna fall asleep. I really do feel like I'm probably gonna just fall asleep after the stream. So I just want to make it to the end of the stream, not fall asleep in the middle of the stream. Here we have another abnormally large character. Now, why is it not safe for work tag not triggering? I don't think I typed in not safe for work as one of the things. I think I opted against that when I almost certainly should. The suggestions themselves are going to be just as dangerous. Yeah, I might need to hide even comments. I never thought about somebody hiding an image in ASCII in the comments. I wasn't thinking that old school of a concept. Yeah. So yeah, there's almost nothing that I could show in an adult game. It does just make the argument that maybe there's no real need. Hmm. And we're looking at December 9th stuff, and feels to me like there's a small chance that we've already seen a lot of this. Here's another game that doesn't have any adult tags at all. Definitely feels like an adult game. See, this is the problem that I'm running into. Might just need to look for the word sex anywhere on the page. This is probably a great example of how hard it is to just filter the internet too. Well, here we have one that's just straight up, I think, stealing anime characters. Alright. Ultimate Sheep Racer's already viewing badly. Really just want to be done for the day. There's kind of no way to be done. Not without just saying I'm gonna do a bunch of this off screen, which honestly I don't know if I really would. This looks like it's the same games from the same publisher. Yeah, same guy. You see, this is why people should be limited on Steam Direct to only putting out one game at a time, one game per month. The percentage of people who abuse even a second game coming out in the same month is really high. Bringing so much right now. A lot of non-English games. How much more do we have to do? A ton, it seems. Right. Doesn't feel too much like a huge amount though, so we'll hopefully just pick up our speed and find a way to be done as quickly as possible. Okay. I'm literally falling asleep here. Alright, so I'm just going to make a marker here. We have potentially 30 more games. Now I think we can power through this. If we just don't do any flawless cleanup, we should be able to power through this and be done for today. There's going to be even a longer experience, I think, on Friday after the Game Awards happens on Thursday. And so, yeah, hopefully I can figure out a way to do that better instead of taking a whole bunch of breaks and falling asleep at the end. Undoubtedly, some small part of this is because I moved that tree sapling, which it would have definitely been better if I didn't do that. Probably wouldn't be so sleepy. Come on. Okay. So yeah, we're not gonna do any flawless cleaning up at all. That means this is the last game to look at. So we are right on the nose for 3 hours. That's gonna be it for this stream. Sorry for being so sleepy and just not really having a lot to say. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.